The steam catapults screamed across the deck of the USS Valiant as another F-A-18 Super Hornet failed to return from the mission that had claimed 7 aircraft in 3 days. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood on the bridge, her weathered hands gripping the rail as she watched the search and rescue helicopters disappear into the storm-darkened horizon of the South China Sea. The typhoon that had been brewing for days was now a Category 4 monster, and somewhere in its fury, another pilot was missing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Commander Sarah Chen had been standing in the ready room for 47 minutes, holding her flight helmet while seasoned naval aviators filed past her with barely concealed smirks. The mission briefing had ended with the same result as the previous 3, no volunteer pilots willing to attempt what everyone was calling a suicide run. The target was a research vessel carrying humanitarian aid workers, stranded in typhoon conditions approximately 200 nautical miles northwest of their current position. 7 rescue attempts had failed. 7 pilots were either missing or had been forced to turn back due to equipment failure, extreme weather, or complete mission abort. The laughter had started when Chen first volunteered. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, call sign Thunderbolt, had actually pointed at her while addressing the room. "You've got to be kidding me. Chen's got maybe 40 hours of carrier ops, and half of those were in perfect weather. This isn't a training exercise, people. This is real-world nightmare, flying in conditions that would challenge pilots with 10 times her experience." The room had erupted in agreement, nods, chuckles, and the kind of dismissive comments that Chen had been hearing since she first stepped aboard the Valiant 6 months ago. She was 28 years old, the daughter of civilian engineers with no military family background and a flight record that looked impressive on paper, but lacked the combat experience that commanded respect in carrier aviation. What the ready room didn't know was that Chen had been studying the weather patterns for the past 72 hours, analyzing the typhoon structure with the same methodical precision she'd applied to her doctoral studies in atmospheric physics before joining the Navy. While other pilots focused on the obvious dangers, wind shear, zero visibility, equipment stress, Chen had identified something different in the meteorological data. The storm had a peculiar asymmetric structure that created brief windows of relative stability, lasting no more than 14 minutes each, occurring in predictable cycles. She had tried to explain this to the mission planners, but her analysis had been dismissed as theoretical knowledge with no practical application. Commander Morrison had cut her off mid-sentence during the briefing. "We don't need a weather lecture from someone who learned to fly in California sunshine. What we need is someone with the stones to get through conditions that have already claimed 7 aircraft." The dismissal stung more than Chen cared to admit, but it wasn't unexpected. She had faced similar attitudes throughout her naval career, compounded by the fact that she had entered through officer candidate school rather than the Naval Academy. Her fellow aviators saw her as an outsider, someone who had taken a spot that should have gone to a pilot with a more traditional background. Captain Michael Torres, the Air Wing commander, had been watching the interaction from the back of the ready room. He was a veteran of 3 deployments, a pilot who had earned his reputation through consistent performance in high-stress situations. Torres had initially been skeptical of Chen's assignment to his squadron, but he had also been the only senior officer to review her training records in detail. What he found had surprised him. Chen's flight scores were exceptional, but more importantly, her decision-making under pressure showed a pattern that was unusual among younger pilots. She consistently chose unconventional approaches that other aviators might consider risky, but her calculations were invariably correct. She had never had a training incident, never failed a check ride, and had demonstrated an intuitive understanding of aircraft systems that impressed even veteran maintenance crews. But none of that mattered in the ready room, where reputation was built on deployments, combat experience, and the kind of proven performance that came from years of carrier operations. Chen was still the new pilot, the outsider, the one who had yet to prove herself in conditions that mattered. The mission parameters were straightforward in theory, but devastating in practice. The research vessel Pacific Dawn was taking on water approximately 200 nautical miles from the carrier's position, directly in the path of Typhoon Helena. The ship carried 18 humanitarian workers who had been providing medical aid to remote island communities when the storm system rapidly intensified beyond all weather predictions. Previous rescue attempts had failed for various reasons. 2 pilots had been forced to turn back due to equipment malfunctions caused by the extreme weather conditions. 3 others had reached the vicinity of the target, but had been unable to establish radio contact or visual confirmation due to zero visibility and communication interference from the storm. 2 more aircraft had suffered critical systems failures and had barely made it back to the carrier, with 1 pilot requiring emergency medical attention after experiencing severe spatial disorientation. The weather conditions were unlike anything most of the pilots had encountered. Sustained winds of 130 miles per hour, with gusts exceeding 160, wave heights reaching 60 feet. Rain so heavy that even the most advanced radar systems were experiencing significant interference. Lightning activity that posed a constant threat to aircraft electronics. And atmospheric pressure variations that could cause sudden altitude changes of several thousand feet without warning. Chen had volunteered for the mission after studying the meteorological data and identifying what she believed were navigable windows within the storm structure. Her analysis suggested that the typhoon's eye wall had an irregular shape that created temporary corridors of reduced wind activity, lasting approximately 14 minutes and occurring in predictable patterns every 47 minutes. The theory was sound, but it required precise timing, exact navigation, and the ability to maintain aircraft control in conditions that pushed both pilot and machine to their absolute limits. It also required a level of faith in meteorological modeling that most combat pilots found difficult to accept when their lives depended on the accuracy of atmospheric predictions. Commander Morrison had made his opinion clear during the briefing. "Chen, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this isn't a classroom exercise. We're dealing with real-world conditions that have already proven too dangerous for pilots with 10 times your experience. Your weather theory might look good on paper, but paper doesn't fly aircraft in typhoon conditions." The comet had drawn approving nods from around the ready room. Chen had felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but she had also noticed something that others might have missed. Captain Torres had been studying the meteorological data on his tablet, his expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. After the briefing had ended and the other pilots had filed out, Torres had approached Chen privately. "Walk me through your analysis," he had said quietly. "Not the summary version you gave in the briefing, the detailed breakdown." Chen had spent the next 20 minutes explaining her interpretation of the typhoon's structure, using weather satellite imagery and atmospheric pressure readings to demonstrate the cyclical nature of the wind pattern she had identified. Torres had listened without interruption, asking technical questions that demonstrated a deeper understanding of meteorology than most pilots possessed. "Your analysis is compelling," Torres had finally said, "but you understand what you're proposing. You're asking me to authorize a mission based on weather windows that last 14 minutes, with no margin for error, and no backup plan if your calculations are wrong." Chen had nodded. "Sir, I understand the risks. But the research vessel has less than 8 hours before the storm surge overwhelms their emergency pumps. If we don't attempt the rescue now, 18 people are going to die, and we'll have missed our only opportunity because we were afraid to trust science over tradition." Torres had studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Chen knew that her career was balanced on the edge of that decision. If she was wrong, if her meteorological analysis proved incorrect, she would be responsible for another failed mission and possibly another lost aircraft. If she was right, she might save 18 lives and prove that unconventional approaches could succeed where traditional methods had failed. Admiral Hayes had been monitoring the situation from the bridge, receiving regular updates on the condition of the stranded research vessel and the declining chances of a successful rescue. The storm system was intensifying faster than predicted, and weather conditions were expected to deteriorate further over the next 12 hours. She had served in the Navy for 26 years, commanding aircraft carriers through multiple deployments and crisis situations. Hayes had developed an intuitive sense for when standard procedures needed to yield to unconventional approaches, and she had been watching the failed rescue attempts with growing concern that they were applying traditional solutions to a problem that required innovative thinking. When Torres had requested a private meeting to discuss Chen's proposed mission parameters, Hayes had agreed immediately. She wanted to hear the analysis that had convinced an experienced air wing commander to consider authorizing what everyone else was calling a suicide mission. Chen had presented her meteorological data with the precision of a scientist and the passion of a pilot who understood that lives hung in the balance. She had identified the typhoon's asymmetric structure, mapped the wind pattern cycles, and calculated the navigation requirements for reaching the research vessel during the brief windows of reduced storm activity. Hayes had listened to the presentation with the attention she reserved for mission-critical briefings. Chen's analysis was thorough, her calculations appeared sound, and her understanding of both meteorology and aviation impressed even the Admiral's senior staff. But the proposed mission still required a level of precision flying that pushed beyond normal operational parameters. "Commander Chen," Hayes had said finally, "you're asking me to authorize a rescue attempt based on weather windows that no one else believes exist, using navigation techniques that haven't been tested in typhoon conditions, with timing requirements that allow no margin for error." Chen had met the Admiral's gaze directly. "Ma'am, with respect, we've already lost 7 aircraft using conventional approaches. The research vessel has less than 6 hours of operational pumps remaining. If we continue applying standard procedures to an extraordinary situation, 18 people are going to die while we debate whether unconventional methods are too risky to attempt." The statement had hung in the air of the Admiral's ready room, carrying the weight of both challenge and opportunity. Hayes had built her career on making decisions that balanced calculated risks against mission requirements, and she had learned to recognize when conventional wisdom needed to yield to innovative approaches. What ultimately convinced her was not just Chen's meteorological analysis, but the pilot's complete understanding of what she was proposing. Chen wasn't presenting a desperate gamble disguised as a plan. She was offering a methodically calculated approach to an impossible situation, backed by scientific analysis and demonstrated by someone willing to stake her career on the accuracy of her calculations. Hayes had authorized the mission with specific parameters. Chen would have one opportunity to reach the research vessel during the next predicted weather window. If atmospheric conditions didn't match her analysis, if the storm patterns proved different from her calculations, if any element of her plan failed to materialize as predicted, she was authorized to abort the mission immediately with no questions asked and no negative impact on her service record. The authorization had created a ripple of shock through the carrier's aviation community. Word spread quickly that the Admiral had approved a rescue mission based on the meteorological theories of the pilot everyone had dismissed as inexperienced and overly academic. The reaction ranged from disbelief to concern, to outright criticism of a decision that seemed to prioritize theoretical weather analysis over proven aviation experience. Commander Morrison had requested a private meeting with Captain Torres, arguing that authorizing Chen's mission was setting a dangerous precedent that could encourage other inexperienced pilots to propose risky operations based on untested theories. Torres had listened to the concerns but had stood behind the decision, pointing out that conventional approaches had already failed 7 times, and that innovative solutions were sometimes required for extraordinary problems. The debate had continued throughout the ship, dividing opinion between those who supported giving Chen an opportunity to prove her analysis, and those who believed the mission represented an unacceptable risk based on unproven meteorological theories. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The discussion had reached every level of the carrier's hierarchy, from enlisted personnel to senior officers, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and tension that affected the entire ship's operations. Chen had spent the remaining hours before her launch window conducting final preparations that went beyond standard pre-flight procedures. She had reviewed every element of her meteorological analysis, double-checked her navigation calculations, and studied the research vessel's last known position and condition reports. She had also spent time with the maintenance crew, discussing aircraft modifications that might improve performance in extreme weather conditions. The maintenance chief, a veteran with 15 years of carrier experience, had initially been skeptical of modifications requested by such a junior officer. But Chen's technical knowledge and specific understanding of how atmospheric conditions would affect aircraft systems had impressed him. She had requested adjustments to flight control sensitivity, modifications to communication equipment, and backup systems activation that demonstrated a comprehensive understanding of the challenges she would face. As Chen conducted her final equipment checks, she was aware that the entire ship was watching her preparation. Some crew members offered encouragement and support, believing that her unconventional approach might succeed where traditional methods had failed. Others remained skeptical, convinced that her mission would end in another failure, or, worse, another lost aircraft and pilot. The weather conditions continued to deteriorate as Chen's launch window approached. The carrier itself was experiencing significant motion from the storm-generated swells. making flight operations more challenging than normal. Several scheduled flights had been postponed due to deck conditions, but Chen's rescue mission remained authorized due to the critical time constraints facing the stranded research vessel. 43 minutes before her scheduled launch, Chen received an update on the Pacific Dawn's condition. The research vessel was taking on water faster than their emergency pumps could handle, and their estimated survival time had been reduced to less than 4 hours. The ship's captain had reported that they were prepared to abandon ship to life rafts if rescue didn't arrive within the next 3 hours. But life raft survival in typhoon conditions was essentially impossible. The update had eliminated any remaining debate about the mission's necessity. Chen's rescue attempt wasn't just another training exercise or routine operation, it was the last realistic chance for 18 people whose lives depended on whether her meteorological analysis was accurate, and whether she possessed the flying skills to navigate conditions that had defeated 7 previous attempts. Captain Torres had conducted Chen's final briefing personally, reviewing mission parameters, communication protocols, and abort procedures. He had also shared information that he had kept confidential during the earlier discussions. 2 of the pilots who had attempted previous rescue missions had reported brief periods of reduced wind activity that matched Chen's predicted weather windows, but they had not recognized the pattern or understood how to use it for navigation purposes. The information had validated Chen's meteorological analysis, while highlighting the precision required to exploit the storm's temporary stability windows. Torres had emphasized that her scientific approach was sound, but the execution would require flying skills that pushed beyond normal operational parameters. Commander Chen, Torres had said during the final briefing, "Your analysis gives you an advantage that previous pilots didn't have. You understand when and where the storm will create navigable conditions. But understanding the theory and executing the flight are 2 different challenges. Once you launch, you'll be operating in conditions that will test every skill you've developed as a pilot." Chen had acknowledged the briefing with the calm confidence that had characterized her approach throughout the mission planning process. She understood the risks, had calculated the requirements, and believed her analysis would provide the navigation framework needed to reach the research vessel successfully. But she also knew that meteorological theory would only carry her so far. The actual rescue would depend on flying skills, decision-making under pressure, and the kind of precision aircraft handling that separated exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. As she walked toward her aircraft for the final pre-flight inspection, Chen was aware that her career in naval aviation would be defined by the next 4 hours. Success would validate her unconventional approach and demonstrate that scientific analysis could complement traditional flying skills to solve problems that neither could address alone. Failure would likely end her naval career and confirm the skeptics' belief that theoretical knowledge was no substitute for proven experience. The F/A-18 Super Hornet had been modified according to Chen's specifications, with enhanced weather radar, backup communication systems, and flight control adjustments designed to improve performance in extreme atmospheric conditions. The maintenance crew had worked through the night to implement the modifications, understanding that the aircraft's performance could mean the difference between mission success and another tragedy. Chen completed her pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision that had characterized her approach to every aspect of the mission. She checked every system, reviewed every modification, and confirmed that the aircraft was configured to handle the extraordinary conditions she would encounter. The inspection took longer than normal, but Chen knew that equipment reliability would be critical when operating in conditions that pushed both pilot and machine to their absolute limits. As she climbed into the cockpit, Chen could see the storm system dominating the horizon, a massive wall of clouds and lightning that stretched beyond visual range. The typhoon represented the kind of weather that most pilots spent their entire careers avoiding, conditions so severe that they challenged the fundamental assumptions of aircraft operation and pilot training. But Chen had studied this particular storm for 3 days, analyzing its structure, mapping its patterns, and identifying the brief windows of opportunity that made navigation possible. She understood the typhoon not as an impenetrable barrier, but as a dynamic system with predictable cycles that could be exploited by a pilot with sufficient knowledge and skill. The launch preparations proceeded with the efficiency that characterized all carrier operations, but Chen could sense the unusual level of attention focused on her mission. Personnel who normally wouldn't have direct involvement in flight operations had found reasons to be present during her launch sequence. The ship's leadership was monitoring her departure from the bridge. And even crew members from other departments had gathered to watch the pilot who was attempting what everyone else had called impossible. Chen ran through her final systems checks as the carrier turned into the wind for launch operations. The ship's motion was more pronounced than normal due to the storm-generated swells, but the flight deck crew executed their procedures with the precision that made carrier aviation possible in adverse conditions. The steam catapult was armed, the aircraft was properly positioned, and all systems showed green. As Chen awaited the launch signal, she reviewed her navigation plan one final time. She would proceed northwest toward the research vessel's last known position, using her meteorological analysis to identify and exploit the brief stability windows within the typhoon's structure. The first window would occur approximately 23 minutes after launch, lasting 14 minutes and providing the opportunity to cover the first 60 nautical miles of her route. The subsequent windows would occur at 47-minute intervals, each lasting approximately 14 minutes and requiring precise navigation to maintain her schedule. Any deviation from her calculated timing would result in encountering the storm's full intensity, conditions that would likely prove fatal to both pilot and aircraft. The launch signal came at exactly the predicted moment, sending Chen's Super Hornet from 0 to 150 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds. The catapult's acceleration pressed her back into her seat with force that never became routine, despite hundreds of previous launches. But as her aircraft cleared the deck and began climbing into the storm-darkened sky, Chen felt the familiar confidence that came from thorough preparation and complete understanding of her mission parameters. Behind her, the USS Valiant continued its operations, but with an unusual level of attention focused on monitoring Chen's progress. The bridge maintained constant communication with air traffic control, tracking her aircraft's position and monitoring weather conditions along her route. The entire ship's company understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented. A rescue mission based on scientific analysis rather than traditional aviation experience, executed by a pilot who had been dismissed by her peers, but authorized by leadership who recognized that extraordinary situations sometimes required unconventional approaches. Chen's aircraft disappeared into the storm system, beginning a journey that would test every element of her training, her analysis, and her ability to execute precision flying in conditions that had defeated 7 previous attempts. The success or failure of her mission would determine not only the fate of 18 stranded civilians, but also the future of innovative approaches to problems that couldn't be solved through conventional methods alone. The first 20 minutes of Chen's flight proceeded exactly as her meteorological calculations had predicted. Her Super Hornet cut through the outer bands of Typhoon Helena, encountering turbulence that would have been considered severe under normal circumstances, but represented the relatively calm conditions she had expected based on her analysis of the storm's asymmetric structure. Lieutenant Commander Peterson monitored Chen's progress from the carrier's Combat Information Center, his eyes fixed on the radar display that tracked her aircraft's position relative to the storm system. Peterson had been skeptical of the mission authorization, believing that Chen's theoretical approach was too risky for practical application. But as he watched her aircraft maintain steady progress toward the first predicted stability window, he began to understand that her meteorological analysis might actually be providing navigational advantages that conventional flying couldn't match. Chen's radio transmissions remained calm and professional as she reported her position and aircraft status every 5 minutes. Her voice carried none of the stress or uncertainty that had characterized the communications from previous rescue attempts. Instead, she sounded like a pilot executing a routine training flight, confident in her navigation plan and aircraft performance. The first stability window opened precisely on schedule, 23 minutes after launch. Chen reported encountering a dramatic reduction in turbulence and wind shear, exactly as her analysis had predicted. For 14 minutes, she was able to maintain cruise speed and optimal fuel consumption while covering 62 nautical miles toward the research vessel's position. Admiral Hayes monitored the mission from the bridge, receiving regular updates from the Combat Information Center and maintaining direct communication with air traffic control. She had authorized Chen's mission based on the pilot's comprehensive analysis, but she also understood that meteorological theory and practical aviation were 2 different challenges. The fact that Chen's first prediction had proven accurate was encouraging, but the mission's success would depend on whether the storm's patterns remained consistent throughout the entire flight. As the first stability window closed, Chen encountered the full intensity of the typhoon's inner bands. Wind speeds increased dramatically, turbulence became severe enough to challenge aircraft structural limits, and visibility dropped to zero. But Chen had expected these conditions and had planned her aircraft configuration and flight profile to handle the storm's maximum intensity. Her training in atmospheric physics provided advantages that purely aviation-focused education couldn't match. Chen understood not just how to fly through severe weather, but why atmospheric conditions affected aircraft performance in specific ways. This knowledge allowed her to anticipate problems before they became critical, and to adjust her flying technique to work with the storm's dynamics rather than fighting against them. Captain Torres received Chen's position reports with growing amazement. Her aircraft was maintaining its planned route with precision that seemed impossible given the weather conditions. Previous pilots had reported significant navigation challenges due to instrument interference and spatial disorientation, but Chen's transmissions indicated that she was encountering fewer problems than expected. The difference lay in Chen's understanding of how the typhoon's structure affected electronic systems and aircraft instruments. She had studied the electromagnetic interference patterns created by the storm's lightning activity, and had developed workarounds for the communication and navigation problems that had plagued previous rescue attempts. Where other pilots had struggled with instrument reliability, Chen had prepared backup systems and manual navigation techniques. Where others had experienced spatial disorientation from the storm's atmospheric pressure variations, Chen had calculated the expected altitude changes and had programmed her autopilot to compensate automatically. Commander Morrison monitored Chen's progress from the ready room, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to professional respect. Morrison had never questioned Chen's flying ability, but he had doubted whether theoretical knowledge could substitute for the kind of practical experience that came from years of carrier operations. Chen's performance was demonstrating that scientific analysis could enhance traditional pilot skills in ways that purely experience-based approaches couldn't match. The second stability window opened exactly 47 minutes after the first, lasting 14 minutes and allowing Chen to cover another 60 nautical miles toward her target. Her fuel consumption remained within planned parameters. Her aircraft systems were performing normally, and her navigation accuracy exceeded the requirements of the mission profile. Chen's radio reports during the second window included information that validated her analysis in ways that even skeptics couldn't dismiss. She described encountering wind patterns that matched her meteorological predictions, atmospheric pressure variations that occurred precisely as her calculations had indicated, and visibility improvements that coincided exactly with her projected timing. But more importantly, Chen was providing real-time weather data that could benefit future rescue operations in similar conditions. Her reports included detailed observations about how the typhoon's structure affected aircraft performance, which navigation techniques proved most effective, and what modifications to standard procedures might improve success rates in extreme weather conditions. Lieutenant Peterson began updating the carrier's weather database with Chen's observations, recognizing that her mission was generating valuable information regardless of its ultimate outcome. Chen's scientific approach was providing insights into typhoon flying that years of conventional aviation experience had never produced. The research vessel Pacific Dawn reported its condition during Chen's approach to the second stability window. The ship was taking on water at an accelerating rate, with less than 2 hours remaining before their emergency pumps would be overwhelmed by the flooding. The vessel's captain confirmed that they were prepared to abandon ship to life rafts, but everyone understood that life raft survival in typhoon conditions was virtually impossible. Chen received the update without changing her measured, professional demeanor. She acknowledged the information and reported that she remained on schedule to reach the research vessel during the next predicted stability window. Her confidence seemed unshaken by the deteriorating situation, as if her meteorological analysis had accounted for all variables and provided solutions for every challenge. The third stability window would be critical for mission success. Chen needed to locate the research vessel, establish communication with the ship's crew, and coordinate rescue operations within the 14-minute window of reduced storm activity. If her timing was wrong, if the vessel had drifted from its reported position, or if weather conditions didn't match her predictions, the mission would fail, and 18 lives would be lost. As Chen approached the third window, her aircraft encountered the most severe weather of the flight. The typhoon's eye wall was generating wind speeds that exceeded design specifications for most aircraft, with turbulence severe enough to cause structural damage to planes not configured for extreme weather operations. Lightning activity was intense enough to interfere with radio communications and navigation equipment. But Chen's preparations had anticipated these conditions. Her aircraft modifications included enhanced lightning protection, backup communication systems, and structural reinforcements designed to handle extraordinary stress. She had also studied the specific effects of typhoon conditions on Super Hornet performance, understanding how to configure her aircraft to operate safely at the edge of its operational envelope. The Combat Information Center tracked Chen's aircraft as it disappeared into the storm's most intense region, losing radar contact due to atmospheric interference. For 12 minutes, the carrier had no direct communication with Chen's aircraft, creating tension throughout the ship as personnel waited to learn whether her approach had succeeded or whether they were witnessing another failed rescue attempt. Admiral Hayes maintained her position on the bridge, monitoring all available information about Chen's mission status. The Admiral had authorized the rescue attempt based on her assessment that Chen's analysis provided the best available chance for success. But she also understood that even the most thorough planning couldn't account for every variable in typhoon conditions. The third stability window opened precisely as Chen had predicted, and her aircraft emerged from the storm's intensity with all systems functioning normally. Her radio transmission to the carrier was calm and professional, reporting that she had visual contact with the research vessel and was beginning rescue coordination procedures. The Pacific Dawn was in worse condition than previous reports had indicated. The vessel was listing severely to starboard, taking on water through multiple hull breaches, and barely maintaining power for essential systems. The ship's crew had already prepared life rafts for abandonment, understanding that they had perhaps 30 minutes before the vessel would become uninhabitable. Chen established direct communication with the research vessel's captain, coordinating rescue procedures that had been planned but never tested in typhoon conditions. The Super Hornet couldn't land on the research vessel, but it could guide the ship toward a temporary safe zone where helicopter rescue might be possible once the storm's intensity decreased. The rescue coordination required precise navigation by both aircraft and ship, with timing that allowed no margin for error. Chen's meteorological analysis had identified a region approximately 15 nautical miles northwest of the vessel's current position, where the typhoon's structure created temporary calm conditions lasting roughly 26 minutes every 2 hours. Getting the research vessel to this location would require the ship to maintain headway in conditions that challenged its ability to remain afloat, while Chen provided navigation guidance and weather updates that could keep the vessel out of the storm's most dangerous areas. The operation pushed beyond standard rescue procedures, requiring innovative approaches that neither pilot nor ship's crew had ever attempted. Chen's guidance proved invaluable for the Pacific Dawn's navigation through the typhoon. Her real-time weather analysis allowed the research vessel to avoid the worst wind and wave conditions, following a route that took advantage of temporary reductions in storm intensity. What should have been impossible navigation became achievable through Chen's understanding of the typhoon's internal structure. The ship's captain reported that Chen's weather guidance was the difference between controlled navigation and certain disaster. Her predictions about wind direction changes, wave pattern variations, and atmospheric pressure fluctuations allowed the research vessel to maintain course and speed through conditions that would normally have overwhelmed their capabilities. As the Pacific Dawn approached the designated safe zone, Chen coordinated with the carrier to arrange helicopter rescue operations during the next extended calm period. Her analysis indicated that the typhoon's eye wall would create a 40-minute window of reduced wind activity, sufficient time for helicopter operations if the timing could be coordinated precisely. The rescue coordination required communication between Chen's aircraft, the research vessel, the carrier's flight operations, and the helicopter crews that would conduct the actual personnel recovery. Chen served as the mission coordinator, using her understanding of the storm's patterns to synchronize all elements of the operation. Captain Torres monitored the rescue coordination from the carrier's flight operations center, amazed by Chen's ability to manage the complex logistics while continuing to fly in conditions that challenged aircraft and pilot limits. Her performance was demonstrating capabilities that went beyond traditional pilot training, showing how scientific knowledge could enhance operational effectiveness in extraordinary circumstances. The helicopter rescue operation proceeded flawlessly, with Chen providing weather guidance that allowed the recovery aircraft to reach the Pacific Dawn during optimal conditions. All 18 humanitarian workers were successfully transferred from the research vessel to the rescue helicopters, completing the mission that 7 previous attempts had failed to accomplish. Chen's aircraft remained on station throughout the rescue operation, continuing to provide weather analysis and navigation guidance until all personnel were safely aboard the helicopters. Her fuel reserves were running low, but her careful planning had included sufficient margin for the extended operations required to coordinate the rescue. As the rescue helicopters departed the area with all survivors, Chen began her return flight to the carrier. The typhoon was continuing to intensify, but her outbound route would take advantage of the same stability windows she had used during the approach. Her meteorological analysis had proven accurate throughout the mission, validating her scientific approach to navigation in extreme weather conditions. The return flight proceeded as smoothly as the outbound journey, with Chen encountering the predicted weather patterns at precisely the calculated times. Her aircraft performance remained within normal parameters, and her navigation accuracy continued to exceed mission requirements. The flight demonstrated that her success hadn't been due to luck or exceptional weather conditions, but to thorough analysis and precise execution. Admiral Hayes received regular updates on Chen's return flight, monitoring her progress with the same attention she had given to the outbound journey. The successful rescue had validated the Admiral's decision to authorize the mission, but Chen's performance throughout the operation had exceeded even optimistic expectations. The Combat Information Center tracked Chen's aircraft as it approached the carrier's recovery zone, preparing for landing operations in conditions that remained challenging despite being less severe than the typhoon's central region. Chen's approach and landing would complete a mission that had demonstrated the value of combining scientific analysis with traditional pilot skills. Lieutenant Commander Peterson prepared the landing approach data for Chen's recovery, calculating the carrier's position and orientation to provide optimal landing conditions. Peterson had been among the skeptics who questioned whether Chen's theoretical approach could succeed where conventional methods had failed, but her performance had convinced him that innovative thinking could solve problems that experience alone couldn't address. Chen's approach to the carrier was textbook perfect, demonstrating the same precision flying that had characterized her entire mission. Her aircraft touched down exactly on the center line, engaging the arresting cables with a kind of accuracy that came from thorough preparation and exceptional skill execution. As Chen's Super Hornet rolled to a stop on the carrier deck, spontaneous applause broke out among the flight deck crew. The personnel who had witnessed her departure with skepticism now recognized that they had been part of something extraordinary. Chen had not only succeeded where others had failed, but had done so using methods that challenged conventional assumptions about aviation and weather operations. Commander Morrison was among the officers who greeted Chen as she climbed out of her aircraft. His earlier skepticism had been replaced by professional respect and genuine admiration for her achievement. Morrison had never questioned Chen's courage, but he had doubted whether theoretical knowledge could substitute for practical experience. Chen's mission had demonstrated that scientific analysis could enhance traditional skills in ways that purely experience-based approaches couldn't match. Captain Torres conducted Chen's post-flight debriefing personally, recognizing that her mission had generated valuable information that could benefit future operations in similar conditions. Chen's detailed observations about typhoon flying, aircraft performance in extreme weather, and navigation techniques for storm conditions represented knowledge that no amount of conventional training could provide. The debriefing revealed the full extent of Chen's preparation and the sophistication of her meteorological analysis. She had identified patterns in the typhoon structure that experienced weather forecasters had missed, developed navigation techniques that could exploit temporary stability windows, and modified standard flying procedures to work effectively in conditions that challenged aircraft design limits. Admiral Hayes reviewed Chen's mission report with the attention she reserved for operations that would influence future doctrine and training. Chen's success had implications that extended beyond a single rescue mission, demonstrating that scientific knowledge could enhance military effectiveness in ways that traditional approaches couldn't achieve alone. The rescue mission had saved 18 lives, but it had also validated an approach to extreme weather operations that could improve success rates for future missions in challenging conditions. Chen's meteorological analysis techniques could be adapted for other weather situations. Her navigation methods could be applied to different aircraft types, and her systematic approach to mission planning could serve as a model for operations that pushed beyond conventional parameters. Word of Chen's successful mission spread throughout the carrier, creating a shift in how crew members viewed both the pilot and the value of unconventional approaches to difficult problems. The officers and enlisted personnel, who had initially dismissed Chen as inexperienced and overly academic, now recognized that her different background had provided advantages that traditional aviation training couldn't match. The mission's success also influenced attitudes toward innovation and risk-taking within the carrier's aviation community. Chen had demonstrated that calculated risks based on thorough analysis could succeed where conventional approaches failed, encouraging other personnel to consider innovative solutions to operational challenges. Chen's achievement represented more than just a successful rescue mission. It validated the principle that diverse backgrounds and unconventional thinking could enhance military effectiveness, that scientific knowledge could complement traditional skills, and that institutional skepticism shouldn't prevent the exploration of innovative approaches to difficult problems. The Typhoon rescue had transformed Chen from an outsider seeking acceptance to a pilot whose methods would influence future training and operations. Her success had earned her the respect of colleagues who had initially dismissed her capabilities, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that extraordinary situations sometimes required extraordinary approaches. As news of the rescue spread beyond the carrier, Chen's mission began to attract attention from weather specialists, aviation experts, and military leaders interested in understanding how her scientific approach had succeeded where conventional methods had failed. Her techniques were studied, her analysis methods were reviewed, and her approach to extreme weather flying became a subject of professional interest throughout the naval aviation community. But for Chen, the mission's significance lay not in professional recognition or career advancement, but in the 18 lives that had been saved through the application of scientific knowledge to practical problems. She had proven that atmospheric physics could enhance pilot skills, that unconventional thinking could solve impossible problems, and that thorough preparation could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The Typhoon rescue marked the beginning of a new phase in Chen's naval career, one defined not by the need to prove herself to skeptical colleagues, but by the opportunity to apply her unique combination of scientific knowledge and flying skills to operations that challenged conventional approaches. Her success had opened doors to assignments and responsibilities that recognized her distinctive capabilities. More importantly, Chen's mission had demonstrated that the Navy's investment in diverse officer backgrounds could yield dividends that purely traditional approaches couldn't achieve. Her success encouraged the evaluation and support of other officers whose unconventional backgrounds might provide advantages in specific operational situations. The rescue of the Pacific Dawn became a case study in innovative problem-solving, analyzed by institutions throughout the military as an example of how scientific knowledge could enhance operational effectiveness. Chen's methods were incorporated into training programs, her analysis techniques were adapted for other weather situations, and her approach to mission planning became a model for operations that required thinking beyond conventional parameters. 6 weeks after the Typhoon rescue, Commander Sarah Chen found herself standing in the Pentagon's briefing room, addressing a gathering of senior naval officers, meteorologists, and aviation specialists who had come to understand how her unconventional approach had succeeded, where traditional methods had failed. The room contained some of the most experienced pilots and weather experts in the military, all focused on learning from a mission that had challenged fundamental assumptions about extreme weather operations. Admiral Patricia Hayes had requested Chen's transfer to the Naval Aviation Development Center, recognizing that her unique combination of atmospheric physics knowledge and practical flying experience could contribute to advancing aviation capabilities in ways that conventional training couldn't achieve. The rescue mission had demonstrated that scientific analysis could enhance operational effectiveness, but the full implications of Chen's approach were still being evaluated by specialists throughout the military. The briefing had been requested by the Chief of Naval Operations, who wanted to understand whether Chen's meteorological techniques could be systematized and taught to other pilots. The successful rescue had saved 18 lives, but if Chen's methods could be adapted for broader application, they might prevent future tragedies and improve success rates for missions conducted in challenging weather conditions. Chen's presentation covered the technical aspects of her Typhoon analysis, explaining how she had identified the storm's asymmetric structure and calculated the timing of stability windows that other pilots had either missed or dismissed as too brief for practical navigation. Her explanation demonstrated that the techniques she had developed weren't intuitive insights that couldn't be replicated, but systematic approaches to weather analysis that could be taught to other aviators. Captain Michael Torres had been promoted to admiral and assigned as Chen's supervisor at the development center, tasked with overseeing the integration of her meteorological methods into naval aviation training programs. Torres understood that Chen's success represented more than just exceptional individual performance. It pointed toward institutional changes that could improve the Navy's ability to conduct operations in extreme weather conditions. The Development Center had been studying Chen's mission data for weeks, analyzing every aspect of her flight planning, navigation techniques, and weather interpretation methods. The analysis revealed that Chen's approach could be broken down into teachable components that didn't require advanced degrees in atmospheric physics, though they did demand more sophisticated weather analysis than traditional pilot training provided. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, the Navy's chief meteorologist, had worked closely with Chen to understand how atmospheric physics principles could be applied to practical aviation problems. Martinez had been impressed by Chen's ability to translate complex meteorological concepts into navigation strategies that could be executed under high-stress conditions. The collaboration between Chen and Martinez had produced a training curriculum that combined traditional aviation weather instruction with advanced atmospheric analysis techniques. The program taught pilots to recognize weather patterns that created temporary opportunities for navigation in conditions that would normally be considered impossible for flight operations. Initial testing of the curriculum had been conducted with experienced pilots from various squadrons, measuring their ability to identify and exploit weather patterns similar to those Chen had used during the typhoon rescue. The results had been encouraging, suggesting that Chen's methods could be learned by aviators without her specialized academic background, though proficiency required extensive practice and careful instruction. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison had volunteered for the Advanced Weather Training Program, his earlier skepticism about Chen's capabilities having evolved into genuine interest in learning techniques that could improve his operational effectiveness. Morrison's participation in the training had been particularly valuable because his initial doubts had forced instructors to develop explanations that could convince skeptical pilots of the method's practical value. The training program revealed that Chen's success hadn't been due solely to her meteorological knowledge, but to her systematic approach to mission planning that integrated weather analysis with aircraft performance calculations and navigation requirements. Her methods required pilots to think beyond immediate weather conditions and consider how atmospheric patterns would evolve throughout extended missions. Morrison's progress through the training demonstrated that experienced pilots could learn to apply Chen's techniques effectively, though the learning curve was steeper than for conventional aviation weather instruction. The program required participants to develop comfort with mathematical calculations and theoretical analysis that most pilots hadn't encountered since their initial flight training. The broader implications of Chen's approach became apparent as the training program expanded to include pilots from different aircraft types and mission specialties. Helicopter crews found that her weather analysis techniques could improve their ability to conduct rescue operations in challenging conditions. Transport pilots discovered that her methods could help them maintain schedules during weather situations that would normally require flight cancellations or significant delays. Admiral Hayes had been monitoring the Development Center's progress with keen interest, understanding that Chen's innovations could influence naval aviation capabilities for years to come. The successful implementation of Chen's methods would represent a significant advancement in the Navy's ability to conduct operations in adverse weather conditions, but it also required institutional changes that challenged traditional approaches to pilot training and mission planning. The resistance to change came from several sources within the naval aviation community. Some experienced pilots argued that Chen's methods were too complex for routine application, requiring mathematical calculations and theoretical analysis that could distract from the intuitive decision-making that characterized effective flying. Others worried that emphasis on meteorological analysis might reduce focus on traditional pilot skills that remained essential for safe aircraft operation. Captain Rebecca Walsh, an experienced aviator with 22 years of service, had initially opposed the integration of Chen's methods into standard training programs. Walsh argued that aviation had always required pilots to make quick decisions based on immediate conditions, and that Chen's systematic approach to weather analysis might slow decision-making in situations where rapid response was critical. However, Walsh's participation in the advanced training program had changed her perspective. She discovered that Chen's techniques didn't replace traditional pilot skills, but enhanced them by providing better information for decision-making. The systematic approach to weather analysis actually improved situational awareness and allowed for more informed choices about flight operations in challenging conditions. The training program's success led to its expansion beyond the Development Center, with selected squadrons throughout the Navy beginning to implement Chen's methods as part of their standard operating procedures. The rollout was gradual, allowing instructors to refine the curriculum based on feedback from pilots with different experience levels and mission requirements. Commander David Park, a flight instructor at the Naval Test Pilots School, had been tasked with developing simulation exercises that could teach Chen's weather analysis techniques without requiring actual flight operations in extreme conditions. Park's work involved creating computer models that accurately represented the atmospheric patterns Chen had learned to exploit, allowing student pilots to practice her methods in safe, controlled environments. The simulation development had been challenging because Chen's techniques required pilots to recognize subtle patterns in weather data that were difficult to represent in computer models. Park's team had worked closely with Chen to ensure that the simulations captured the essential elements of her approach while providing realistic training scenarios that prepared pilots for actual operations. The first graduation class from the expanded weather training program included 12 pilots from different squadrons and aircraft types. Their performance evaluations showed significant improvement in their ability to conduct operations in challenging weather conditions, with success rates in simulated extreme weather scenarios improving by an average of 37% compared to pilots trained using conventional methods. The success of the training program attracted attention from other military services and allied nations interested in improving their own aviation capabilities in adverse weather conditions. Chen found herself invited to present her methods at international conferences and military exchanges, sharing techniques that had originated from a single rescue mission but had evolved into systematic approaches with broad applications. The Royal Navy had been particularly interested in Chen's methods, recognizing their potential value for operations in the North Atlantic, where extreme weather conditions frequently challenged aviation operations. An exchange program had been established allowing British pilots to train at the Naval Aviation Development Center, while Chen and her team studied European approaches to weather flying that might enhance their own techniques. The international attention had been personally rewarding for Chen, but she remained focused on the practical applications of her work. Her primary motivation continued to be the improvement of aviation safety and operational effectiveness, not the professional recognition that her innovations had brought. She measured success by the number of missions that could be conducted safely in conditions that would previously have been considered too dangerous for flight operations. Dr. Martinez had documented the scientific basis for Chen's weather analysis techniques, publishing research papers that explained the atmospheric physics principles underlying her methods. The publications had been well received by the meteorological community, contributing to broader understanding of how typhoon and hurricane structures could be analyzed for navigation purposes. The research had also attracted interest from civilian aviation organizations dealing with similar challenges in commercial flight operations. Airlines operating in regions frequently affected by severe weather had begun experimenting with adaptations of Chen's techniques, recognizing their potential for reducing weather-related flight delays and cancellations. Chen's work at the Development Center had expanded beyond weather analysis to include broader questions about how scientific knowledge could enhance aviation capabilities. She had begun studying other areas where systematic analysis might improve operational effectiveness, including aircraft performance optimization, navigation accuracy enhancement, and mission planning efficiency. The broader research program had attracted additional personnel with diverse academic backgrounds, creating a team that combined practical aviation experience with expertise in mathematics, physics, engineering, and computer science. The multidisciplinary approach had proven effective for developing innovative solutions to operational challenges that traditional aviation methods couldn't address. Admiral Torres had been promoted to lead the Navy's aviation innovation initiatives, with Chen serving as his deputy for scientific applications. Their partnership had been highly effective, combining Torres's operational experience with Chen's analytical capabilities to identify opportunities for improving naval aviation effectiveness through systematic innovation. The innovation program had produced several successful projects beyond Chen's weather analysis techniques. The team had developed improved navigation systems for operations in GPS-denied environments, enhanced aircraft maintenance procedures that extended equipment life, and mission planning tools that optimized fuel consumption and flight time for complex operations. The success of these innovations had influenced the Navy's approach to officer recruitment and development, with increased emphasis on attracting personnel with diverse academic backgrounds who could contribute specialized knowledge to operational challenges. Chen's career had demonstrated that unconventional expertise could provide significant advantages when properly integrated with traditional military skills. The Typhoon rescue had been recognized with several awards, including the Distinguished Flying Cross for Chen's exceptional performance under dangerous conditions. But Chen valued more highly the systemic changes that her mission had inspired, recognizing that the long-term impact of her work would be measured by improvements in aviation safety and capability, rather than individual recognition. The rescue mission had also influenced naval aviation doctrine, with official recognition that extreme weather operations required specialized techniques that went beyond traditional pilot training. New regulations had been established for conducting missions in severe weather conditions, incorporating Chen's systematic approach to weather analysis and mission planning. The doctrinal changes had been implemented gradually throughout the Navy, with experienced pilots receiving additional training in advanced weather analysis, while new aviators learned Chen's techniques as part of their basic instruction. The integration had been carefully managed to ensure that traditional pilot skills remained emphasized while adding the scientific analysis capabilities that Chen's success had demonstrated. 5 years after the Typhoon rescue, Commander Chen had been promoted to captain and assigned to lead the Navy's Advanced Aviation Research Division. Her organization had grown to include specialists from multiple disciplines, all focused on identifying and developing innovative approaches to aviation challenges that conventional methods couldn't address effectively. The research division's work had expanded internationally, with collaborative programs involving allied nations and civilian research institutions. Chen's original weather analysis techniques had evolved into comprehensive systems for predicting and exploiting atmospheric conditions that affected aviation operations, with applications ranging from carrier operations to strategic airlift missions. The division had also begun studying how artificial intelligence and machine learning could enhance the weather analysis techniques that Chen had originally developed through manual calculation and observation. The integration of advanced computing with atmospheric physics had produced weather prediction systems that could identify navigation opportunities in severe conditions with accuracy that exceeded human analysis capabilities. Chen's personal satisfaction came not from her professional advancement, but from the knowledge that her work had contributed to aviation safety and operational effectiveness throughout the Navy. The techniques she had developed during preparation for a single rescue mission had evolved into systematic approaches that improved the service's ability to conduct operations in challenging conditions. The international recognition of Chen's contributions had included invitations to lecture at military academies and civilian universities, sharing her experience with audiences interested in understanding how scientific analysis could enhance practical problem-solving capabilities. Her presentations emphasized the importance of systematic thinking and thorough preparation, qualities that had enabled her success during the Typhoon rescue. Chen's story had become part of naval aviation lore, taught to new pilots as an example of how unconventional thinking and thorough preparation could succeed where traditional approaches failed. But the lessons drawn from her experience went beyond aviation, illustrating principles about innovation, perseverance, and the value of diverse perspectives that applied to many different professional challenges. The USS Valiant had been decommissioned and replaced by a newer carrier, but the ready room where Chen had first volunteered for the Typhoon rescue mission contained a plaque commemorating her achievement. The inscription read simply, "In memory of 18 lives saved through courage, innovation, and the application of scientific knowledge to practical challenges." New pilots serving aboard the Valiant's replacement learned about Chen's mission during their orientation, understanding that their service continued traditions of excellence that included both conventional heroism and innovative problem-solving. The story served as inspiration for aviators facing their own challenges, demonstrating that success could come through different paths but always required thorough preparation and professional dedication. Admiral Hayes had retired after 30 years of naval service, but she remained involved in aviation development as a consultant and advisor. Her decision to authorize Chen's rescue mission had been vindicated by its success and the subsequent innovations that had emerged from Chen's work. But Hayes valued most highly the principle that the authorization had represented: the importance of supporting innovative approaches when conventional methods proved inadequate. The research vessel Pacific Dawn had been repaired and returned to humanitarian service, carrying medical supplies and personnel to remote communities throughout the Pacific region. The ship's crew maintained contact with Chen, recognizing that their survival had depended on her willingness to attempt a mission that others had considered impossible. The 18 humanitarian workers who had been rescued during the typhoon had returned to their various organizations and continued their work providing medical care to underserved populations. Several had written letters to Chen expressing their gratitude, but they understood that her satisfaction came from the professional knowledge that scientific analysis could save lives when properly applied to practical challenges. Chen's methods had been adopted by rescue organizations throughout the world, improving their ability to conduct operations in severe weather conditions. The techniques she had developed for naval aviation had proven applicable to civilian rescue services, Coast Guard operations, and emergency medical flights, expanding the impact of her innovations beyond military applications. The typhoon rescue had demonstrated that institutional skepticism shouldn't prevent the exploration of innovative approaches to difficult problems, but it had also shown that such exploration required individuals willing to stake their careers on the accuracy of their analysis. Chen's success had encouraged other military personnel to propose unconventional solutions to operational challenges, knowing that thorough preparation and systematic thinking could overcome initial skepticism. The Naval Aviation Development Center had become a model for military innovation, combining practical operational experience with advanced scientific knowledge to develop solutions that neither purely military nor purely academic approaches could achieve independently. The center's success had influenced similar programs throughout the military, encouraging the integration of diverse expertise in addressing complex challenges. Chen's career had evolved from that of an outsider seeking acceptance to a leader whose methods influenced aviation operations throughout the military. Her success had demonstrated that diverse backgrounds and unconventional thinking could enhance institutional effectiveness, encouraging the military to recruit and develop personnel with specialized knowledge that complemented traditional military skills. The Typhoon rescue remained the defining moment of Chen's career, but it had also become the foundation for systematic improvements in aviation safety and capability that extended far beyond a single mission. Her willingness to challenge conventional assumptions and apply scientific analysis to practical problems had created lasting changes that continued to benefit aviation operations years after her original achievement. The story of Chen's rescue mission had been documented in professional journals, military histories, and popular accounts that emphasized different aspects of her achievement. Some focused on the technical details of her meteorological analysis, others on the courage required to attempt a mission that others had considered impossible, and still others on the institutional changes that her success had inspired. But for Chen, the mission's significance remained personal and practical. 18 lives had been saved through the application of scientific knowledge to an immediate problem, demonstrating that systematic thinking and thorough preparation could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The professional recognition and career advancement that had followed were secondary to the knowledge that her work had made a difference when it mattered most. The Typhoon rescue had proved that expertise could come from unexpected sources, that innovation could emerge from the integration of diverse knowledge, and that institutional effectiveness could be enhanced by supporting unconventional approaches to difficult problems. These lessons had influenced military training, operational procedures, and organizational culture in ways that extended far beyond aviation, contributing to a broader understanding of how complex organizations could adapt and improve through systematic innovation. Chen's legacy lay not just in the specific techniques she had developed, but in the principle she had demonstrated, that thorough analysis, systematic preparation, and the courage to challenge conventional assumptions could succeed where traditional approaches failed. Her career had shown that individual innovation could create institutional change, and that diverse perspectives could enhance organizational effectiveness when properly supported and integrated. The morning briefing aboard the USS Valiant had begun like countless others, with weather updates that painted a grim picture of deteriorating conditions across the South China Sea. Captain Rebecca Walsh reviewed the overnight reports with growing concern, noting that Typhoon Helena had intensified beyond all meteorological predictions and was now tracking directly toward their operational area. The research vessel Pacific Dawn had been conducting humanitarian medical operations among remote island communities when the storm system had rapidly developed from a tropical depression to a Category 4 typhoon in less than 18 hours. Such rapid intensification was rare, but not unprecedented in the region's warm waters, though the speed of this particular storm's development had caught even experienced weather forecasters by surprise. Commander Sarah Chen had been monitoring the situation from her quarters, studying satellite imagery and atmospheric data with the focused attention she brought to all weather-related challenges. Her background in atmospheric physics had trained her to recognize patterns that purely aviation-focused education might miss, and something about this typhoon structure had captured her analytical interest. The storm exhibited an asymmetric eye wall formation that created unusual wind patterns throughout its circulation. Most typhoons developed relatively symmetric structures that generated predictable wind flows, but Helena showed irregularities that suggested temporary stability windows might exist within its overall circulation pattern. These windows would be brief, lasting perhaps 10 to 15 minutes, but they might provide opportunities for navigation that conventional weather analysis would overlook. Chen had spent the pre-dawn hours developing mathematical models of the typhoon's internal structure, using atmospheric pressure readings and wind velocity measurements to calculate when and where these stability windows might occur. Her analysis suggested that the storm's irregular formation created predictable cycles of reduced turbulence, occurring approximately every 45 to 50 minutes and lasting long enough for aircraft operations if the timing could be calculated precisely. The challenge was that her theoretical analysis contradicted conventional wisdom about typhoon flying, which held that such storms created uniformly dangerous conditions that made aviation operations impossible until the system passed or significantly weakened. Chen's calculations suggested that selective navigation through the storm's structure might be feasible, but proving her theory would require flight operations in conditions that most pilots considered suicidal. When the call for rescue volunteers had gone out during the morning briefing, Chen had immediately recognized an opportunity to test her meteorological analysis under real-world conditions. The Pacific Dawn situation was desperate enough to justify attempting unconventional approaches, and the timing coincided with her predicted stability windows in ways that suggested her theoretical framework might provide practical navigation advantages. Her volunteer declaration had been met with the kind of dismissive laughter that she had learned to expect from colleagues who viewed her academic background as irrelevant to practical aviation challenges. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison's reaction had been particularly cutting, questioning not just her experience level, but her understanding of what real-world aviation demanded from pilots facing life-or-death situations. The skepticism wasn't entirely unreasonable from their perspective. Chen's carrier operations experience was limited compared to veteran pilots who had conducted hundreds of launches and recoveries under various conditions. Her flight record, while impressive in training scenarios, lacked the combat and emergency operations that seasoned aviators use to evaluate each other's capabilities under stress. But Chen's confidence in her meteorological analysis was based on systematic study of the typhoon's structure rather than intuitive assessment of flying conditions. She had identified specific atmospheric patterns that created temporary opportunities for navigation, calculated the timing of these opportunities with mathematical precision, and developed flight plans that could exploit the storm's internal dynamics rather than fighting against them. Admiral Patricia Hayes had been observing the volunteer selection process with the analytical attention she brought to all personnel decisions that could affect mission success. Hayes had reviewed Chen's service record in detail, noting not just her limited carrier experience, but also her exceptional performance in training scenarios, and her unique educational background that might provide advantages in situations requiring innovative approaches. The Admiral's decision to authorize Chen's mission, despite the skepticism of more experienced pilots, reflected her understanding that extraordinary situations sometimes required unconventional solutions. Hayes had built her career on making calculated risks when standard procedures proved inadequate, and Chen's systematic approach to an impossible problem aligned with the kind of innovative thinking that had served Hayes well throughout her naval service. Chen's pre-flight preparations had gone far beyond standard procedures, involving detailed analysis of atmospheric conditions, aircraft performance calculations under extreme weather stress, and navigation planning that accounted for the typhoon's internal structure rather than treating it as a uniform barrier to flight operations. Her approach demonstrated the kind of thorough preparation that separated exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. The aircraft modifications that Chen had requested reflected her understanding of how typhoon conditions would affect Super Hornet systems and performance. Enhanced weather radar, backup communication equipment, structural reinforcements, and flight control adjustments all addressed specific challenges that her atmospheric analysis had identified as critical for mission success. Maintenance Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez had initially been skeptical of modifications requested by such a junior officer, but Chen's technical knowledge and specific understanding of aircraft systems had impressed him. Her requests demonstrated comprehensive awareness of how extreme weather would affect every aspect of aircraft operation, from engine performance to navigation equipment reliability. The modifications had required the maintenance crew to work through the night, understanding that aircraft reliability could determine whether the mission succeeded or resulted in another tragedy. Rodriguez had supervised the work personally, ensuring that every modification was implemented exactly according to Chen's specifications, and that all systems were tested thoroughly before flight operations. As Chen's launch time approached, the carrier's atmosphere had grown increasingly tense. Personnel throughout the ship understood that they were witnessing either an innovative solution to an impossible problem, or a tragic demonstration of why experience mattered more than theoretical knowledge in aviation operations. The outcome would determine not just the fate of 18 stranded civilians, but also the future of unconventional approaches to operational challenges. The launch sequence had proceeded with the mechanical precision that characterized all carrier operations, but Chen could sense the unusual level of attention focused on her departure. Flight deck personnel, who normally wouldn't have direct involvement in launch operations, had found reasons to observe her takeoff, understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Chen's Super Hornet had accelerated down the carrier deck and lifted into the storm-darkened sky with perfect execution, beginning a journey that would test every element of her training, analysis, and flying ability. The initial flight phases had proceeded exactly as her meteorological calculations predicted, with atmospheric conditions matching her theoretical models with precision that validated her scientific approach. The first stability window had opened precisely on schedule, providing 14 minutes of reduced turbulence that allowed Chen to cover significant distance toward the research vessel's position while maintaining optimal fuel consumption and aircraft performance. Her radio transmissions had remained calm and professional, reporting conditions that matched her predictions and navigation progress that exceeded standard expectations for typhoon flying. Lieutenant Commander Peterson had monitored Chen's progress from the Combat Information Center, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to professional amazement at her aircraft's steady advancement through conditions that had defeated multiple previous rescue attempts. Peterson had coordinated search and rescue operations for 8 years, but he had never witnessed navigation performance like Chen was demonstrating in impossible weather conditions. The second stability window had provided additional validation of Chen's meteorological analysis, allowing her to maintain course and speed through regions of the typhoon that should have been completely impassable for aircraft operations. Her weather predictions had proven accurate not just in timing but in the specific atmospheric conditions she encountered, demonstrating that her theoretical framework could translate into practical navigation advantages. Captain Torres had received Chen's position reports with growing recognition that her mission represented more than just an individual achievement. Her systematic approach to extreme weather flying was generating real-time data about typhoon structure and navigation techniques that could benefit future operations in similar conditions. The mission was producing valuable knowledge regardless of its ultimate outcome. Chen's approach to the research vessel had required navigation precision that challenged the limits of both pilot skill and aircraft capability. The Pacific Dawn was barely maintaining position in sea conditions that threatened to overwhelm the vessel's structural integrity, while Chen coordinated rescue operations from an aircraft operating at the edge of its performance envelope in atmospheric conditions that pushed beyond normal operational parameters. The rescue coordination had demonstrated Chen's ability to manage complex logistics while continuing to fly in conditions that demanded constant attention to aircraft control and navigation. Her understanding of the typhoon's structure had allowed her to predict wind and weather changes that enabled the research vessel to reach a location where helicopter rescue operations could be conducted safely. The successful recovery of all 18 humanitarian workers had validated not just Chen's individual performance, but her systematic approach to solving problems that conventional methods couldn't address. Her meteorological analysis had provided the foundation for mission success, but the execution had required flying skills, decision-making under pressure, and coordination abilities that demonstrated comprehensive professional competence. Chen's return flight to the carrier had proceeded as smoothly as her outbound journey, with atmospheric conditions continuing to match her predictions and aircraft performance remaining within normal parameters, despite the extraordinary operational environment. Her navigation accuracy and fuel management had exceeded mission requirements, demonstrating that her success hadn't been due to luck, but to thorough preparation and precise execution. The landing aboard the USS Valiant had been executed with textbook precision, completing a mission that had challenged fundamental assumptions about aviation operations in extreme weather conditions. Chen's aircraft had touched down exactly on centerline, engaging the arresting cables with the kind of accuracy that came from exceptional pilot skill combined with systematic mission planning. The spontaneous applause from flight deck personnel had reflected their recognition that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Chen had not only succeeded where others had failed, but had done so using methods that demonstrated how scientific analysis could enhance traditional pilot skills to solve problems that neither approach could address independently. Commander Morrison had been among the officers who greeted Chen as she climbed from her aircraft, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine professional respect. Morrison had never questioned Chen's courage or dedication, but he had doubted whether theoretical knowledge could substitute for the kind of practical experience that came from years of carrier operations. Chen's mission had proven that diverse expertise could enhance, rather than replace, traditional aviation skills. The post-flight debriefing had revealed the full sophistication of Chen's preparation and the systematic nature of her approach to extreme weather operations. Her detailed analysis of typhoon structure, aircraft performance calculations, and navigation techniques represented knowledge that no amount of conventional training could provide, suggesting that her methods could be adapted for broader application throughout naval aviation. Admiral Hayes had reviewed Chen's mission report, with the recognition that her achievement had implications extending far beyond a single rescue operation. Chen's success had demonstrated that scientific knowledge could enhance military effectiveness in ways that traditional approaches couldn't achieve, pointing toward institutional changes that could improve the Navy's operational capabilities in challenging conditions. The mission's success had influenced attitudes throughout the carrier, creating recognition that diverse backgrounds and unconventional thinking could provide operational advantages when properly integrated with traditional military skills. Chen's achievement had challenged assumptions about experience and expertise, while demonstrating that systematic analysis could succeed where intuitive approaches failed. Word of the rescue had spread throughout the naval aviation community, attracting attention from weather specialists, training organizations, and operational commanders interested in understanding how Chen's methods could be applied to other situations. Her techniques were studied, her analysis methods were reviewed, and her approach to extreme weather flying became a subject of professional interest at multiple levels. The broader implications of Chen's success had become apparent as military institutions began evaluating how her meteorological techniques could be integrated into standard training and operational procedures. Her systematic approach to weather analysis represented a significant advancement in aviation capabilities, but implementing her methods required institutional changes that challenged traditional assumptions about pilot training and mission planning. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, the Navy's chief meteorologist, had begun working with Chen to develop training curricula that could teach her weather analysis techniques to other pilots without requiring advanced degrees in atmospheric physics. The collaboration had produced educational programs that combined traditional aviation weather instruction with the kind of systematic atmospheric analysis that Chen had used for her rescue mission. The training program development had been challenging because Chen's techniques required pilots to think beyond immediate weather conditions and consider how atmospheric patterns would evolve throughout extended missions. Her methods demanded comfort with mathematical calculations and theoretical analysis that most aviators hadn't encountered since their initial flight training, requiring instructional approaches that could bridge the gap between practical flying and scientific analysis. Initial testing of the curriculum had been conducted with volunteer pilots from various squadrons, measuring their ability to identify and exploit weather patterns similar to those Chen had used during her typhoon rescue. The results had been encouraging, suggesting that her methods could be learned by aviators without specialized academic backgrounds, though proficiency required extensive practice and careful instruction. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had volunteered for the Advanced Weather Training Program, his earlier skepticism having evolved into genuine interest in learning techniques that could improve his operational effectiveness. Morrison's participation had been particularly valuable because his initial doubts had forced instructors to develop explanations that could convince skeptical pilots of the method's practical value. The training program had revealed that Chen's success hadn't been due solely to her meteorological knowledge, but to her systematic approach to mission planning that integrated weather analysis with aircraft performance calculations and navigation requirements. Her methods required pilots to develop comprehensive understanding of how multiple factors interacted to create opportunities for navigation in conditions that would normally be considered impossible. Morrison's progress through the training had demonstrated that experienced pilots could learn to apply Chen's techniques effectively, though the learning curve was steeper than for conventional aviation weather instruction. The program required participants to develop comfort with systematic analysis and mathematical calculation that complemented rather than replaced traditional pilot skills and intuitive decision-making. The success of the pilot training program had led to its expansion beyond individual squadrons to include aviation personnel from different aircraft types and mission specialties. Helicopter crews had found that Chen's weather analysis techniques could improve their ability to conduct rescue operations in challenging conditions, while transport pilots had discovered that her methods could help them maintain schedules during weather situations that would normally require significant delays or cancellations. Captain Rebecca Walsh, initially opposed to integrating Chen's methods into standard training programs, had changed her perspective after participating in the advanced weather instruction. Walsh had discovered that Chen's techniques didn't replace traditional pilot skills but enhanced them by providing better information for decision-making under challenging conditions. The systematic approach to weather analysis actually improved situational awareness and allowed for more informed choices about flight operations. The training program's success had attracted attention from other military services and allied nations interested in improving their own aviation capabilities in adverse weather conditions. Chen had found herself invited to present her methods at international conferences and military exchanges, sharing techniques that had originated from a single rescue mission but had evolved into systematic approaches with broad applications. The Royal Navy had been particularly interested in Chen's methods, recognizing their potential value for operations in the North Atlantic where extreme weather conditions frequently challenged aviation operations. An exchange program had been established allowing British pilots to train at naval facilities in the United States, while Chen and her team studied European approaches to weather flying that might enhance their own techniques. The international attention had been professionally rewarding for Chen, but she remained focused on the practical applications of her work rather than the recognition her innovations had brought. Her primary motivation continued to be the improvement of aviation safety and operational effectiveness, measured by the number of missions that could be conducted safely in conditions that would previously have been considered too dangerous for flight operations. Dr. Martinez had documented the scientific basis for Chen's weather analysis techniques, publishing research papers that explained the atmospheric physics principles underlying her methods. The publications had been well received by the meteorological community, contributing to broader understanding of how typhoon and hurricane structures could be analyzed for navigation purposes beyond traditional weather forecasting applications. The research had also attracted interest from civilian aviation organizations dealing with similar challenges in commercial flight operations. Airlines operating in regions frequently affected by severe weather had begun experimenting with adaptations of Chen's techniques, recognizing their potential for reducing weather-related flight delays and cancellations while improving passenger safety during challenging atmospheric conditions. Chen's work had expanded beyond weather analysis to include broader questions about how scientific knowledge could enhance aviation capabilities in multiple areas. She had begun studying aircraft performance optimization, navigation accuracy enhancement, and mission planning efficiency, applying the same systematic analytical approach that had made her Typhoon rescue successful. The broader research program had attracted additional personnel with diverse academic backgrounds, creating multidisciplinary teams that combined practical aviation experience with expertise in mathematics, physics, engineering, and computer science. The collaborative approach had proven effective for developing innovative solutions to operational challenges that traditional aviation methods couldn't address comprehensively. Admiral Torres, promoted to oversee naval aviation innovation initiatives, had worked closely with Chen to identify opportunities for improving aviation effectiveness through systematic innovation. Their partnership had combined Torres's operational experience with Chen's analytical capabilities to develop multiple successful projects beyond the original weather analysis techniques. The innovation program had produced improved navigation systems for operations in GPS-denied environments, enhanced aircraft maintenance procedures that extended equipment life, and mission planning tools that optimized fuel consumption and flight time for complex operations. Each project had applied the same systematic approach that had made Chen's Typhoon rescue successful, demonstrating that her methods had broad applications. The success of these innovations had influenced the Navy's approach to officer recruitment and development, with increased emphasis on attracting personnel with diverse academic backgrounds who could contribute specialized knowledge to operational challenges. Chen's career had demonstrated that unconventional expertise could provide significant advantages when properly integrated with traditional military skills and institutional knowledge. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.